In this video, we will talk about one of the greatest war machines of human history, the Wehrmacht. The Wehrmacht, ironically translated into Defense Force in English, was the official name of the armed forces of Nazi Germany from 1935 to 1945. It was made up of three branches: the Heer, which is the army, the Kriegsmarine, the navy, and the Luftwaffe, the air army. The Heer included all land units, which meant that it included regular infantry, motorized infantry, and also tanks. After the Treaty of Versailles and the end of World War I, the Reichswehr, the name given to the German army during the Weimar Republic, was limited to only 115,000 men, 100,000 in the army and 15,000 in the navy. Germany's weapons of war were also limited to 6 battleships, 6 cruisers, 12 destroyers, submarines, tanks, and heavy artillery were banned, which meant that all modern weapons were pretty much banned. Conscription was also banned under the terms of the treaty. As you can imagine, this was absolutely embarrassing for the German government. Germany has always had a strong sense of nationalism and prided itself on its strong military ever since the defeat of Napoleon and the formation of the German Confederation in 1815. They were a global superpower thanks to their military, and the terms of the treaty has now crippled their ability to reform a strong military. The Germans were obviously not very happy with this, so they began to secretly train additional troops and also started building an air army. The Treaty of Rapallo was an agreement between the Weimar Republic and the Soviet Union, where amongst many political agreements, German tank and air troops can perform exercises in Russia, and Russian officers were trained in Germany. When Hitler formalized his power as the Führer of Germany in 1934, thanks to the efforts of militaristic generals like Hans von Seeckt, the Reichswehr has already developed new military doctrines, which was a precursor to the German Blitzkrieg that was so successful in early parts of World War II. By 1935, Hitler was openly neglecting the Treaty of Versailles. Rearmament and general conscription was announced on March 16th. No more than 17 months later, 36 divisions were already trained and equipped. Assuming each division has about 15,000 men, that would be over 540,000 German soldiers, readied in just a year and a half of rearmament. This is significantly higher than the limitations brought upon Germany in the Treaty of Versailles. This expansion continued, and after Hitler annexed Austria in March 1938, 5 Austrian divisions were incorporated directly into the Wehrmacht. By September 1st, 1939, on the day of the invasion of Poland, Germany had 60 divisions stationed on the Eastern Front to invade Poland, 49 divisions stationed on the Western Front to defend against the potential French and British attack, and 3 divisions stationed in Germany. Before 1938, a lot of military authority was in the hands of the War Ministry under Field Marshal Werner von Blomberg. Hitler wasn't happy about this and decided to get rid of him through the Blomberg-Fritsch Affair, where they accused von Blomberg's wife of being a former prostitute. Von Blomberg's successor was Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel. Keitel was basically Hitler's puppet and carried out Hitler's orders at will. Keitel was also the man who signed Germany's surrender at the end of the war. After the Blomberg Affair, the duties of the Minister of War was incorporated into the newly formed OKW. Keitel was made the head of the new OKW, and since Keitel was basically Hitler's puppet, this meant that Hitler had supreme control over the entire Wehrmacht. Each of the 3 branches had their own central command. Technically, the OKW was the ultimate high command and commanded the OKH, OKM, and OKL. However, as the war progressed and more fronts were opened, The OKW began to handle the Western Front while the OKH managed the Eastern Front. The OKM did its own thing for the most part, and the OKL worked in collaboration with the OKW and OKH. If you're wondering how the Waffen-SS played into this structure, officially the Waffen-SS was not a part of the Wehrmacht, but most of the Waffen-SS units came into command of the front it was serving on. So for example, if a Waffen-SS unit was deployed on the Eastern Front, it would be under the control of the OKH. The original requirements for joining the Wehrmacht was high. Hitler wanted a physically superior and pure German army. After the invasion of the Soviet Union, the German High Command changed their stance and started allowing foreign volunteers and conscripting many non-Germans into the Wehrmacht. The fitness standards for recruits were also drastically lowered. Rear echelon troops were sent to the front lines whenever possible. A number of foreign combat groups were formed, like the Russian Liberation Army, the Ukrainian Liberation Army, the Free Arabian Legion, Turkestan Legion, and so on. A total of 18.2 million soldiers served in the Wehrmacht, and a staggering 10 million would become casualties of war. Out of those 10 million, 2 million will be killed in action, 5 million wounded in action, 3 million missing in action, and in the Second World War, when a soldier goes missing, they're most likely dead. Their corpses were left in the field of battle and probably buried into mass graves without any identification. On to a more sensitive topic. We know the Nazi regime had extermination plans against ethnic and religious groups, like the Jews, Gypsies, and Slavic people. But how did the Wehrmacht play into Hitler's plans? Most of the dirty work was perpetrated by groups like the Einsatzgruppen, an SS death squad that operated and conquered territories, murdering any Jews or undesirables they came across. The job of the Wehrmacht was not to exterminate the declared enemies of the state, but rather to conquer territories. But of course, things are hardly that simple in wartime. The Barbarossa Decree stated that the war against Soviet Russia would be a war of extermination, and executions are not a matter for military courts, but rather the organized action of the military. Here are some of the points from the decree. Every officer in the German occupation in the East of the future will be entitled to perform executions without trial, without any formalities on any person suspected of having a hostile attitude towards the Germans. German soldiers who commit crimes against humanity, the USSR, and prisoners of war are to be exempted from criminal responsibility, even if they commit acts punishable according to German law. In simple terms, the Nazi regime promoted the killing of all Soviet prisoners of war and civilians. Killing any Russian will not get you into trouble. This means that the lives of Russian POWs and civilians were at the mercy of individual German commanders and soldiers. A German soldier can choose to avoid unnecessary killing or kill anyone they pleased. There were also direct orders for criminal activity. For example, Gestapo chief Heinrich Müller on October 20th, 1942 ordered all captured political commissars of the USSR to be executed on the spot. There were also huge numbers of rapes against Soviet women. In Lviv, 32 women working in a garment factory were raped and murdered by German soldiers. A priest trying to stop the atrocity was also murdered. It is estimated that more than 1 million children were born to Russian women and German soldiers due to mass rape. The amount of brutality committed against Soviet soldiers and civilians will be repaid when the Soviet Union started winning on the Eastern Front. German civilians will be murdered and women raped in the hundreds of thousands, if not millions, by Red Army soldiers. So is the Wehrmacht a criminal organization? Some would argue that the majority of German soldiers are fighting for their country, and they do not have any intention to kill anyone with no reason. Others would say that the majority of German soldiers did participate in war crimes. The true answer is a difficult one. The Wehrmacht, at its prime from 1939 to 1941, was undoubtedly the world's most powerful war machine, with superbly trained troops and advanced military tactics. The Soviet Union, with its huge population, ultimately stemmed the tide from 1942 onwards with its numerically superior forces and significantly higher industrial production. The Wehrmacht was fighting a losing war with the Red Army on the Eastern Front while being invaded on the Western and Southern Front. Hitler once said that nothing was impossible for the German soldier, and his arrogance for what the Wehrmacht could ultimately achieve led to its downfall.